So this morning I want to talk about taking off the mask that we hide behind our real selves. Well, we started this series last week, Me Too. Everybody needs somebody. And between Mother's Day and Father's Day, we want to spend about those 6 weeks talking about the relationships that God has put us in. We all live with family. We live as sons or daughters. We have children. We have friends at work, we have neighbors, we have coworkers, and then we have our relationships with God. And so we want to, over these few weeks, talk about all of those relationships and how to live in them as godly men and women. But today, I want to challenge you to take off the mask, be brave enough to be the real you. You see, there's this temptation in all of us to hide the things that are going on in our lives so that nobody sees what we're really like. So open your Bibles, go back in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 3. We read of the first people who are hiding, and not just hiding from others, but they're hiding from God. But we read the first hiding story on the 3rd page of the Bible. It starts early. So here's what we read about Adam and Eve. Now just to give you some texture, background to the story, Eve has been tempted by Satan several times now as a serpent, saying, eat from the tree of good and evil. And finally she does. Genesis 3, verse 6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord called to the man, "Where are you?" And he answered, "I heard you in the garden, but I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." So we read these words. Adam says, I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. I think it would be correct to say that Adam was naked and afraid. I'm just saying, I've been thinking this would make a great reality series show. I've just been thinking that. I don't know. There could be something there. But isn't that true that all of us, when we've done something that's not right, we tend to hide? We hide because of shame. He's ashamed of his nakedness, but his shame has come from his sin. Sin causes shame. Shame causes us to hide. We all, at some time, in some way, do that in our lives. The challenge today is to step out of that. I have this key idea in your handout this morning. I hope it sticks with you. One of life's most freeing and empowering practices is to stop hiding from our trouble and pretending it's all okay, but instead live authentic with God and with others. And so as we look at this challenge and we look at the lives of Adam and Eve and how the story of humankind started, I want to make 2 observations. The first one that I want to make is this. All of us, every person, is tempted to hide behind a mask. It's just how we're wired. When we've done something that we know is not right before God or among other people, we want to hide it. The Bible calls our problem in this world sin. The reformers talk about it as depravity or total depravity. We are born as human beings with a tendency to do things that are wrong to each other and wrong before God. If you doubt what I'm saying, then just picture a toddler, maybe a 2-year-old, and you've come home and you've given your 2-year-old the toy he's been asking for, a Chewbacca Star Wars figure, maybe. I don't know what 2-year-olds want anymore. My kids are a lot older than that. But let's say you give him that. And then let's say about 5 minutes later, his 2-year-old cousin walks in the room. What will your 2-year-old say? I think his natural human tendency will say, hey, I'm so excited about my Chewbacca Star Wars figure. I want you to have it. And he will give it to his cousin. I think that's just how he's wired. And by the way, have my sucker too. Not at all. What he's going to do, he's going to turn like this and put it behind him and say, I see you're looking at my Chewbacca. All right, you try to touch it, I'll bite your nose. You know, that's what every 2-year-old, that's how every 2-year-old is wired. And as adults, we don't change a whole lot. I think there's this temptation in all of us to wear a mask like Tony was showing to you. We wear a mask to hide our problems, to hide our past, to hide our mistakes, because we're afraid if people find out what I'm really like, maybe they won't accept me. One of a human being's, a man or woman's deepest desire is to belong. We're just made that way. But we're afraid that if someone really finds out the truth about our character, then they'll reject us and we won't belong anymore. And so that's one of our first motivations. The other is we don't want people to feel sorry for us, and so we hide. We also are afraid of consequences. Maybe it's from a spouse, or consequences at work, or consequences from God himself, and so we hide. We're all tempted to hide behind a mask. But hiding has never worked. In fact, hiding is a curse. I think most of us are tempted to hide things like our addictions, we hide our fears, we hide our failures. And in our hiding and in wearing a mask, we wear a mask to pretend that the problems in our lives are not that bad. And so we end up pretending that we are happier than we really are. We pretend that our career is more perfect than it really is. We pretend that our finances are better than they really are to impress people. We pretend even that our kids are smarter than they even are. So we buy bumper stickers off the internet that say, my kid was on the honor roll. I don't even know where you buy those, but people buy them and put them on their car because we want to pretend that everything is better than it is. That's what hiding and that's what masks do to us. God asked Adam this. He says, Adam, where are you? And Adam says, I'm hiding behind the trees. I've thought about this a lot over the last couple of weeks as I've been reading and thinking about this passage. I think hiding from God and hiding from others, it's a learned behavior, because I think really small kids don't hide how they're feeling at all, especially if they're under like the age of 2. Have you ever played peekaboo with a kid, and when you put your hand in front of your face and you move your hand, they laugh and they think it's funny, but do you know what happens if you keep your hand there too long? They start to cry. They think you've really disappeared and they're so sad, it's tragic, and you're just behind your hands, but they don't want you gone even for that long. But the older kids get, they learn that if I hide the things that are frowned on, then I get through life better. At the University of Toronto, there's a professor of psychology by the name of Dr. Joan Peskin, and she writes about children and their behaviors. She writes about her own 3-year-old son. She said she was making cookies one afternoon, late in the afternoon, and her son came in and says, hey, Mom, can I have one? And she says, no, wait till after dinner. You're going to spoil your appetite. He's only 3, so 2 minutes later, he's back in looking in the kitchen. 5 minutes, 8 minutes, he keeps checking every few minutes. And she's wondering, why does he keep coming? And finally, he stands in the door and he says, Mom, would you leave the kitchen so I can steal a cookie? He wants to hide his behavior. He knows he might get away with it. Dallas Willard, one of the great preeminent thinkers on spiritual formation, writes in his book, Renovation of the Heart. He writes about a 2.5-year-old girl by the name of Larissa. And Larissa is at her grandmother's house, and her grandmother takes her outside and says, hey, Larissa, do you want to water the purple flowers? And Larissa's excited, so she turns the hose on, and Larissa starts to water the purple flowers. Grandma, or Nana, as Larissa calls her, sitting on the porch doing her what do you call the word game? Anyway, word puzzle. And so she's watering, and then she sees as she's watering the flowers, 2.5-year-old Larissa sees there's mud forming under the flowers. So she puts the hose down and she starts putting her hands in there. She says, Nana, I'm making warm mud pies. I'm making pies right now, chocolate. And Nana looks at her in horror and says, your mom's going to kill me. And she tries to clean her up and she says, okay, Larissa, you can keep watering the flowers, but you can't play in the mud. Well, she's only 2.5, and as her grandmother goes back to doing her word puzzles, she puts the hose down again, but this time she says, Nana, don't look at me now. And she puts her hand back in the mud. It's getting all over her dress. And Dallas Willard says she keeps saying, Nana, don't look at me now. And she has her hands and she's covered in, Nana, don't look at me now. 2.5-year-olds aren't the only ones that do that, are they? It's like we're all like Adam and Eve. We say, God, don't look at me now. Maybe you're in business and you're filling out your expense report, and maybe you're fudging slightly, so you say, hey, God, don't look at me now. I'll take care of this, okay? Or maybe you're a college student and you're printing a paper off the internet that's clearly not yours. You say, hey, God, don't look at me now. I think at times in all of our lives we have that don't look at me now moment, and God is saying, hey, show me who you are. You don't have to keep hiding. Hiding is a curse. Hiders tend to blame others. Let's go back to our passage here, and God says, why are you hiding? And Adam says, God says, Adam says, because we're naked. And God says, who told you you were naked? And then he says, did you eat from the tree? Do you know what Adam answers? He says, he thought about taking all of the blame on himself, but then he goes, no, actually it was the woman who caused us to eat from the tree. And then he adds this, he says, the woman who you made. You see, Adam's blaming everyone but himself. The Bible is filled with hiding stories. None of them seem to work. Jesus talks about people who hide like this. He uses this word. He uses the word hypocrite. It's a really strong word, but maybe what you don't know about the word hypocrite is a hypocrite it's originally a Greek word that means an actor, someone who's playing a part, someone who's wearing a mask, just like Tony showed us. That's the word that Jesus used. And so he says this, for example, this is in Romans chapter 3. No, it's not. Hang on one second. Hold on. Matthew chapter 23. Verse 23. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spice, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of law and justice and mercy and faithfulness. And so he says, you're just actors pretending to be more spiritual than you actually are. I lived in Los Angeles for about 10 years. I was a youth pastor there, and high schoolers and junior hires don't call people hypocrites in LA. They call them posers. And they take great offense to posers, people who pretend that they can surf or skateboard. The junior highs and high schoolers that I worked with called them posers. Usually they were referring to people from a state called Arizona that were there, zonies, on vacation, posing as skaters and as surfers. But I was on the beach once at Huntington Beach, and I was there with some college buddies years and years ago. And another guy from college shows up. His name is Dave, and Dave has 2 young ladies with him. And we're like, whoa, how did that happen? And you'd be asking the same question if you knew Dave. Anyway, so he's there. But he has a surfboard, and I'm going, and someone says, Dave surfs? So when he comes over to say hi, someone says, hey, Dave, you really know how to surf? He says, oh, yeah, I just can't get in the water right now because I don't have any wax for my board. I forgot it. And so one of the guys with us, he really was a surfer, says, well, you can have my wax. Why don't you borrow mine? So Dave goes, oh, okay. So he goes over. It takes him 45 minutes to get, it should take 5, to get the wax on the board. An hour later, he's still not in the water, but he has a CD case and he's scraping off all the wax. And someone says, Dave, why are you taking the wax off? He goes, yeah, the sun melted. I got to get this right. He waxes that thing like 4 times, spends the whole afternoon, never gets in the water. Do you know why? Because Dave's a poser. That's why, because Dave, the only reason he got those 2 girls, I'm sure, to come with him, because he said, I'm going to show you how to surf. But he doesn't know how to surf. And the truth is, we tend to go through life like that. But the truth about hiding our secrets, the truth about hiding the things that are not right in our lives is, it starts to break us down. It starts to eat us up on the inside. Do you know what researchers have found about people who carry secrets? That we start to physically feel unwell. We start to have more headaches and backaches and neck aches. Do you know what they say about people who carry secrets? We start to run a low-grade depression. Do you know why? Because authenticity is connected to joy and happiness. And if we're hiding something, we just can't, we're not really ourselves. If we're pretending, we can't find joy and happiness. When we harbor and hold secrets, we feel tired, exhausted, because mentally we're constantly trying to find ways to cover up the secrets that we have behind us. They say that people who carry secrets even physically feel heavier, like life is heavier. They make horrible basketball players because they can't jump very high. People with secrets, because we feel life literally starts to feel like that, and it starts to erode our souls on the inside. Because people want to get secrets off their chest so much, I think everyone knows this now. There's even an app that's been developed. It's called the Whisper app. And on the Whisper app, they get 1 million hits every day, by the way. And on this Whisper app, you can go in and share a secret, something you wouldn't share with anyone else. I brought a few examples here. This one says, I work at a hotel. The blankets only get washed once a year. That's just disgusting, but those are the kind of secrets people are sharing on the Whisper app. Here's another one. I sold my Xbox and all my games for her engagement ring. I'm proposing to her on a date tonight. That's pretty awesome. But I was just wondering, is this guy like 14 years old that, he's selling the Xbox and his games? Here's another one. This is, now sometimes people get real on them. I got all excited when my phone notified me saying that I had a Snapchat. I was like, yay, I have friends. And then it said, from Team Snapchat. That's so sad. Okay, I got one more here. This one says, I paid my little brother to clean my room with Monopoly money. He had no idea. All right, so all of you guys, in junior high, if you have a little brother that's under 5, go ahead, pay him a Monopoly money. It works. But at the end of the day, hiding secrets starts to eat away at us, and we never become the person, the man or the woman that God intended for us to be. I said I had 2 observations from this passage. The first observation is that we all tend to hide. We all tend to wear masks sometimes. We're all tempted to do that. The second observation is we crave authenticity. We are drawn to people who are authentic and real. The Bible holds this interesting story in Exodus chapter 34. In Exodus 34, Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, and God gives him the 10 Commandments, right? Now, maybe you don't know the rest of the story. He comes down the mountain, and because he's been in the presence of God, his face is glowing and shining, kind of like a firefly or an iPad at night. I don't know, but he's glowing. And people are talking, saying, wow, Moses is so spiritual. He's been in the presence of God because his face is shining. But then the rest of the story is, it starts to fade. Listen to this. So Paul picks up the story. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 13. He says, we are not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face. So can you picture this? Moses comes down the mountain, and now he puts a veil over his face. But why? Why does he put a mask on? To prevent the Israelites from seeing the end of what was passing away. So as he came down, as he left the presence of God, the longer he was away from God, the more the brightness would fade. I'm sure his wife was happy, saying, like, you've been keeping me up half the night with your face glowing like an iPad in bed. But he didn't want people to see that he was less spiritual, more human like everyone else, because he was away from the presence of God. So he puts a mask, a veil over his face. It sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? A lot of people tend to live that way. But then Paul picks up the story. 2 Corinthians 3:18, but we Christians have no veil over our faces. We can be mirrors that brightly reflect the glory of the Lord. And as the Spirit of God works within us, we become more and more like Him. And so Paul says, you don't have to wear that mask anymore. You don't have to pretend that you're more spiritual like Moses was trying than you really are. You can stop hiding. It's okay. God will forgive you for that. Do you know that people are fundamentally attracted to others who are genuine and authentic? In the same way, we're turned off by people who are two-faced or are inauthentic, or lack being genuine. I was doing a seminar. I was on a panel with Brad Lomanek. Brad Lomanek just wrote H3 Leadership. We had him speak at the Grove in January. And we're on this panel in Atlanta, and the panel was about why are millennials leaving the church in record numbers. And so one of the first questions we were asked was, what do millennials want most in the church? What do they want when they come to church? What do they want more than anything else? And Brad, in a half a second, came back with this. He says they crave authenticity. They don't want to be sold a product. They don't want to deal with people who are fakes. They crave authenticity. And Brad is right. I think all of us long for that. We all want to be close to people who are like that. I have 3 levels of authenticity that I just want to share with you. People talk about as we become close with others, there are 3 levels of being real and open and honest. The first is described as cautious conversation. We are cautiously open with others as we're just getting to know them. Sometimes in churches, I feel like people pressure others too quickly to divulge deep information, and maybe it takes time before we can do that, and that's okay. Because I remember not too long ago, I was visiting a friend in Southern California, and it was a Saturday, and he said, "Hey, we have a Saturday night service. Why don't you come with me?" So we went together, and as we're going through the courtyard, we run into one of his friends from his men's ministry, helped me lead the men's ministry there. And this guy started to talk to me, and my buddy's talking to someone else. And in about 3 minutes, it was just a 3 or 4 minute conversation, he starts to tell me about all the garbage in his life he had been dealing with over the last year. His marriage had fallen apart, but it's coming back together because he had done this, and he had done this. And I was like, wow, that's a little TMI, but thank you for sharing that with me. We just met. So when I sat down in church, I said to my buddy, "Do you know what he told me while you were busy?" I said, "He shared everything." And my friend said, "Well, in our men's ministry, we're trying to encourage that." I said, "Well, that's awesome." Well, after church, about 3 or 4 more of his buddies wanted to hang out. So we went to Denny's. Not for the culinary experience, but because they're always open. They're open late. And so we're at Denny's. And the 3 friends with him, they start telling me about all the things they've been hiding in their lives and all the garbage they've been dealing with over the last year and the things that tempt them and how they've dealt with them. And I thought, man, this is a lot that they're sharing. And then one of them looked at me and said, "So Palmer, what is your signature sin?" I was like, whoa, really? I just am getting to know you. I don't know. I don't eat all my broccoli. I don't know. Anyway, I wasn't quite ready for that. And so if we're just sometimes, we have conversations that are superficial, but you know what? That leaves us wanting and lacking. There's something deeper that we crave. And so the next level of communication of authenticity is to live genuine, to live open and honest with people that we can share our feelings with. Do you know that kids, for example, can't help but living genuine? Kids have a hard time hiding what they're thinking on their faces. Kids will divulge everything. It just takes one question. They spill all the beans. They do. Because that's how God made them. And maybe that's why Jesus said the kingdom of heaven belongs to little people like them. Because they stop all the hiding. John Ortberg, who's one of my favorite writers on the subject of spiritual formation, he writes about his neighbor. And his neighbor's daughter, she's 3 also. We're talking about little kids today. And it's her birthday. And so her parents buy her first tricycle. And she goes to the bottom of the driveway. And when she gets there, her mother stops her. She's about to bust out of there. And her mother says, "Hey, you see the neighbor's tree on the left? You can't go past that tree. And you see the tree over there at the other neighbor's house? You can't go past that tree." And this little 3-year-old, John Ortberg's neighbor, looks left, and then she looks right, and then she backs the tricycle. She just backs it up, and looks at her mom. She says, "Mom, I've got a lot of places I have to go, and I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm not going to be able to stay inside of those boundaries. I have things to do. It's a big world. So you just better spank me right now." I'm not. Kids, the little guys, they won't even bother lying to you. They're just going to tell you what's in their soul. Now, we can't live like that with everyone, but God has wired us to need that in our lives. And I wonder if you've been wearing masks or hiding what needs to come up. What we need most when it comes to authenticity is a few safe, godly friends. We all need godly men or women that we can come close to and we can be honest with. People who I've described as safe. You all have spotted unsafe people. Solomon writes about them in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 19. He says, a gossip can never keep a secret. Be careful around people who talk too much. Solomon is right. It still happens today. And you know what? We all have this longing to get off of our chest the things that aren't right. And an app is not enough, even an app with 1 million hits a day. They say in life, and I mentioned this last week, we have 100 acquaintances. We have 35, we all have about the same levels here, 35 friends. We have about 10 close friends, but then we all need 5 safe, godly men or women who the Bible says sticks closer than a brother or a sister. We need them in our lives to be safe people for us. A safe person holds your confidence. You can spot an unsafe person from a mile away, can't you? They start sentences with words like, now I'm just telling this to you. You know, those kinds of people, watch out. Or if they say, I love her like a sister, but let me tell you this about her. And unsafe people, maybe they give advice too quickly. Unsafe people, when you spend time with them, you feel broken down instead of built up. Safe people have this way of building us up. So as I talk about taking off this mask that many of us wear and living authentically, why is that so critical as followers of Christ? It's critical because you cannot have joy and peace in your life until you do. I said that authenticity is connected to joy and happiness. And until we take off that mask, we'll never experience the joy and happiness that Christ has for you. Until you take off that mask, you will never be free of all of those things that are weighing you down. And so I want to end by challenging you with 2 action steps. The first one is to find a few safe people and move towards them, those kinds of people we've been talking about. And then finally, I want to challenge you to take steps to draw near to God. Because the Bible keeps reminding us that we don't have to hide anymore. No matter what we've done in our lives, we can stop hiding because what Christ did on the cross takes away all of our shame. It takes away all of our sin. There's nothing too shocking that God is not willing to forgive. Paul writes this in Romans chapter 3, verse 22. We were made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who you are. And I'll add, or what you've done. Verse 23, for everyone has sinned. We have all fallen short of God's glorious standard. Yet God in His grace freely makes us right in His sight. He did this through Christ Jesus when He freed us from the penalty of our sin. And so if you have been hiding behind a mask, if you have been pretending, you can stop now. You can come clean before God. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to wear a mask anymore. You don't have to hide in the trees. And so find those friends that you can walk this life through. At the Grove, I think at the Grove we have piles of those people. If you're a young couple, find an older couple that can mentor you and you can talk through your problems with. If you're struggling in your work life, find a man or a woman who's been doing what you are doing. They've been doing it for decades. If your finances are something you're ashamed of and you've been hiding because the credit card or the debts are too much, then find a godly man or woman who's brilliant with finances and let them walk with it through you. Stop hiding those things. Instead of hiding from the face of God, I want you to pray a prayer with me. It's a famous prayer from the book of Numbers where God tells Moses, teach the people to pray like this. Ask them that my face turn toward them. We don't need to hide from the face of God anymore, but we can ask for His face to turn on us.